On this exciting episode, Hamilton and Perry pull up Cole Porter and brush up on their Shakespeare so that they can trade bard-related barbs. When you try the murder of a playwright whose work is C-grade drama, that's what you gotta do. It's Perry Mason, Season 2, Episode 21, The Case of the Lost Last Act. Welcome to the Perry Pod. I'm your humble host, Jonathan Searcy, and my purpose here is pretty simple: provide an audio companion to the greatest legal drama in television history, Perry Mason. I plan to do a pod for every episode of the television series, and as time permits, I'll look at some of those made-for-TV movies too. I'll be working through the series in the order in which the episodes were aired. Each episode I'll give a brief refresher on the plot, and if the episode was based on a novel, I'll compare the book with its television adaptation. Next, I'll list some key pieces of trivia, as well as tackle the episode's main theme. We'll feature a Perry proverb, a moment of wisdom from the man himself, and then we'll finish with a post-case water cooler, where just like Perry, Della, and Paul, we can rehash the ins and outs of their adventures. But first, to the law library! Each episode in the Law Library, we return to prior cases to refresh our memories about Perry's past, so we can find fresh precedents for future cases. In the case of the Lost Last Act, we get a first for Perry and the crew: a fictional play submitted as evidence in court.
Now I submit that this play, the Royce play, is based on the Volpone murder. If it please the court, I'd like to apologize to the court and to counsel. I didn't realize what counsel was trying to bring before the court. Not only will I make no objection, I will stipulate that all facts concerning the murder of Rick Volpone can be considered in connection with the case presently at bar. I'm most willing for counsel to proceed.
Makes me wonder what other kinds of fictional evidence has been submitted in court in Perry Mason, since Perry is an expert at introducing fiction into a trial in such a way as to get at the truth. You'll recall, for instance, the makeshift gun stand from the case of the nervous accomplice, constructed after the fact. It, of course, never gets entered into evidence, but is sufficiently scary to make Roxy Jarvis reveal the true murderer. The closest analog I can think of regarding the play as evidence in this episode is the voice recording that Perry commissions featuring an actress who sounds like Mary Kay Davis. This clip comes from the case of the Screaming Woman.
Some people may say that I am needlessly hurting an innocent person by this story. That as a result, a life may be ruined.
You'll remember that Perry tries desperately to get Hamilton Berger not to admit the recording as evidence. Hamilton does it anyway, even though Perry knows it's a fake. And then Ruta Lee can't contain herself. Case closed. In this episode, the inverse happens. Perry wants the play admitted. Again, though he's skeptical, Berger plays along. Perry gets his way and gets the courtroom victory. Here's my question, a kind of bonus Paul prompt. Was there ever a real-life court case where an attorney submitted a Perry Mason novel or episode as evidence to help support his or her case? Your Honor, the prosecution would like to enter as Exhibit C the case of the glittering goldfish as a demonstration that it's possible for a man with an Oxford degree to still hold a lousy job and commit murder. You know, fiction making its way back into the real world? If you have any leads, let me know. Anywho, let's get to the plot of this episode. The Case of the Lost Last Act. Playwright Ernest Royce is reading his newest work to his actors and financial backers. With 2 acts down and 1 to go, they're not fans.
You didn't like the first 2 acts, Mr. West?
No, none of it.
And you, Helen?
Well, it disturbs me, Ernest. I feel there's something very wrong with it.
It's not fair to judge a play by 2 acts, but...
Yes?
Well, frankly, I didn't like what I heard.
Unfortunately, we can't tell whether or not the last act saves the play aesthetically because, boy oh boy, it's lost.
If this is someone's idea of a joke, I don't appreciate it.
What's happened?
The last act, someone took it out of the script and replaced it with blank pages.
Royce seems like a real twerp. He writes without kindness, but in a cruel twist, he's also a schnook. I guess that's not much of a twist, huh? To make matters worse, he's having an affair with the girlfriend of the dude whose money is making the entire thing possible. That guy's name? Frank Brooks. And Brooks isn't happy with Royce's double play. Get it?
So I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to take my girl and my money out of your show.
You can't do that. It was a deal.
A bad deal.
Well, you know Royce is going to end up dead and Brooks is going to be prime suspect number 1. When Royce gets knocked off, Brooks goes immediately to Perry Mason before the cops ever seek him out. And he lays on a thick story of going from rags to riches.
Mr. Mason, I got a record. The cops are going to tie my prince in with that record. Look, I was brought up on the rackets. I know all the tricks. If I'd wanted to kill Royce, I wouldn't have left any fingerprints behind.
That, honest money?
Honest, I worked for every cent of that.
Doing what?
This. The Brooks Drive-Ins. Eat the best from east to west. There's one on every major highway in the United States.
Perry declines the handsome retainer he's offered by Brooks, and that leaves Frank to get arrested by a particularly saucy trag.
It's always easier for me if somebody says, what do you want?
I'll 10 to 1 it ain't a hamburger.
What do you want?
Thank you, miss.
You, got a warrant?
Of course. Miss Foster, I'm sorry to bother you this way. You're it.
Just as with the death of any low-down schnook in Perry Mason, the suspects are many. There's the 2-timing actress Faith Foster, ironic name, who preferred a playwright to a playboy.
Well, I don't see why I have to run away just because you threatened to...
Well, go on, baby. Finish what you were going to say.
I heard you, Frank. I heard you tell Ernie Royce you'd be back last night.
You were there all the time.
There's lead actress Helen Dwight, who's been saddled with parts in Ernest Royce productions all along the line, and who seems to attract men like a flame attracts moths. Her husband, her publicist, that gangster, who hasn't fallen in love with Helen Dwight?
If you'd look at your characters with love instead of hate, Ernest.
Especially the character you'll play?
Another suspect is the aforesaid publicist, the newspaperman turned PR whiz who thinks of theater like a church.
When I'm inside a theater, I'm in a church. When I see a great play, I hear angels singing. When I see great performances, I'm walking the streets of heaven. Those streets are very clean and beautiful, Mr. Mason. They should be kept that way.
I repeat, why didn't you like Ernest Royce?
He was a litter bug.
Don't forget Helen's husband, producer John Gifford, who's constantly backing bum Royce plays and brandishing murder weapons in court.
Better give it to me, Mr. Gifford.
This gun has a limited vocabulary. It speaks one short word. And everything that is suddenly revised. What is becomes what was. And what might have been can never be.
Please, Mr. Gifford, the gun.
Has one more word to speak. It would be the wrong word, Mr. Gifford.
Well, constantly may be an exaggeration, but you get the idea. And none of these people committed the crime. The guilty party is Michael Dwight, the brother of Helen, who offed the gangster who was in love with Helen 10 years ago, and offed Ernest Royce, who was threatening to reveal his guilt in his newest play.
You killed Volpone and you killed Royce. And you made John and Helen suffer all these years. Why,
Yes! I killed Volpone. Because he hurt Helen. And I killed Royce.
Well, Frank may have lost the character faith, but he didn't lose his faith in justice, and everybody's happy, especially Paul, because the whole gang is going to get to chow down at one of Frank Brooks's famous hamburger stands.
We were all invited to dine with Brooks at his Wilshire Drive-In. You know, the place that serves the flaming hamburgers.
And scene. Now, let's get trivial, shall we? Each episode in our trivia section, I give you 3 takeaways. A Paul is a subject worth investigating more. Adela is something about a particular actor or actress who appears in the episode. And a Perry is something we learn about our intrepid hero. Our Paul prompt for this episode has to do with banking hours. Early in the episode, Ernest Royce tries to weasel his way out of paying Frank Brooks back his cash by claiming the banks are closed. Frank Brooks is having none of it.
I want that money back, and I want it in cash.
Well, it's too late. The banks are closed.
It's Friday. The banks are open until 6. It's only 5 now.
So our Paul prompt is this. Is this really a thing? Were bank hours especially long on Fridays? Presumably to accommodate payday deposits in the days before automatic deposits? Are we still in the days of the late Friday bank hour? Our Della for this episode concerns Stacey Harris. We've seen Harris earlier this season when he appeared as the drunken murder victim in the case of the married moonlighter. That's right, from deceased to defendant in 15 episodes. Not bad, Stacey!
Because I never really looked at you before. It's been nice knowing you, Faith.
Born in 1918, the Quebec, Canada native tried his hand at an assortment of trades before he got into acting. He apparently served as a political cartoonist for the New Orleans Times-Picayune. He wrote about sports for the San Francisco Chronicle, and the guy served as a pilot in the Army in the late 30s until a leg injury ended his military career. So the guy decided to get with the merchant seaman. He drove an ambulance and worked in the French Foreign Legion during World War II. His first foray into acting came on the radio, where he joined popular shows like Pepper Young's Family and The Strange Romance of Evelyn Winters. He was one of 3 actors who portrayed Batman in the radio show The Adventures of Superman. Bonus, here are the other 2, Gary Merrill and Matt Crowley. He made a regular gig of This Is Your FBI, a show with the distinction of having J. Edgar Hoover's personal stamp of approval. Producer Jerry Devine said he dug Stacey's voice for what he called its quiet authority. Pretty soon, Harris was grabbing a hold of the coattails of one Jack Webb, and he appeared on the Webman's multiple radio programs, including Jeff Regan, Investigator, Pat Novak for Hire, and Pete Kelly's Blues. In fact, he was particularly in demand on Jack's show Dragnet, where he carried over into the television incarnation of that show, and Harris portrayed a carnival of lowlifes. Radio led him to TV and films, including Adam 12 and Emergency. Apparently, Jack Webb even named his eldest daughter Stacy in tribute to his friend. Hey, I'm just giving you the facts. Besides Perry Mason, Stacey Harris starred in westerns and cop shows until his untimely death in 1973 from a heart attack. He was only 54 years old. Our Perry for this episode involves our intrepid hero's literary tastes. As he reads the work of Ernest Royce, we find he doesn't like literature that's unpleasant.
Happy reading?
Hardly. Mr. Royce is not my kind of writer.
Did you read the book, too?
Mm-hmm. Unpleasant. And that's an understatement.
Okay, admittedly, that's not as revealing an insight as one might have hoped for. From this description alone, what kind of books do you think are more Perry's speed? To wit, is Perry the sort of guy who would read a Perry Mason novel? Now, before the show implodes on itself, we better get to our theme. Our theme for this episode is nature and art. We start with Perry's superficially baffling quotation from Shakespeare. So Perry wants to use Ernest Royce's uncompleted play in the trial. And this leads to this exchange between Berger and Mason.
Has Mr. Berger read the play? Yes, Mr. Berger has. And if he may quote Shakespeare, it is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying nothing. Shakespeare also said, nature is above art in that respect.
Berger seems dazed that Perry went with a deep cut. A King Lear quotation, Act 4, Scene 6, if you're tracking it home. And he doesn't bother to ask exactly what Perry's talking about. I mean, Perry could have also retorted, Shakespeare also said, what's in a name? That which we call a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. Or perhaps Shakespeare also said, to thine own self be true. Conspicuously, no one's quoting the line from Henry VI, Part 2, quote, the first thing we do, let's kill all the lawyers. But we've gotten far afield. Let's get back to the quotation. He's gone with nature's above art in that respect. So, let's say nature is a stand-in for the real world. And let's say art is Ernest Royce's play. In other words, the real world of this trial is above the play Ernest Royce has written in that respect. So now the question is, in what kind of respect? In what way is the trial or the real world above art, the play Ernest Royce has written? The antecedent of that is in Hamilton's quotation about the play. That the play, he claims, is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and fury, signifying, aka meaning, nothing. I think what Perry is saying here is that the real world of this case is so full of sound and fury that comparatively it's so idiotic and meaningless that Royce was such a schnook and the list of possible suspects so long and baffling that he and Hamilton might as well go to the art, that is Royce's play, to try and find a solution. The real world is even more confusing than the play. So art can help clarify things that are confused. And this proves to be the case. Perry figures out a major dilemma by simply reading the play closely. Who killed the gangster 10 years ago? Michael Dwight. The contemporary dilemma of who killed Ernest Royce has the same answer. Michael Dwight. So what do we make of Royce's work? On the one hand, we hear nothing but cheap shots at his skill. Just listen back to what the critics said in the episode's first scene. They're ready to agree with Berger. Joyce is a litterbug. Perry calls Royce's work unpleasant. But you know what else? Royce is a truth teller in his fiction. That's right, he tells more truth in his fiction than he does in real life. Now, I don't know why Royce chose to poke the bear in this particular play. I mean, why risk angering one of the people whose money he continues to take? But he does it, and while he remains a thoroughly loathsome human being, someone ought to give him his props. This is his most successful play, and it wasn't even complete. It caught a murderer. He's not wrong when he says this is his best work. Art saves lives.
For the first time as a writer, I'm telling the truth.
Like Frank Brooks's life, for instance. Now, I'm someone who teaches Shakespeare for a living and makes a podcast about a fictional TV show for fun, so you might want to take this all with a grain of salt. But sometimes fiction, art, makes the truth, nature, clearer. Now, let's listen to a Perry proverb. Would-be readers and patrons of libraries everywhere, listen closely to Perry's evaluation of the world of book publishing. Caveat lector.
Why would a publisher want to print a collection of unsuccessful plays?
Della, there are certain printers who will publish anything if you pay the cost of the printing.
Let the reader beware. They will publish anything and everything these days. Then again, the Kindle digital publishing world has produced some great books like the Perry Mason book, which you can get for $5 on Amazon. Don't be so quick to dismiss it, Perry. Now, let's grab a sip from the water cooler.
There is one thing I don't understand.
Go on, Paul.
Our Paul prompt from the last episode involved the automatic putting machine located in Charles Burroughs' office in the case of the stuttering bishop. I gave y'all a stumper. We couldn't find the definitive answer. Aunt Myra and my father looked around. They found ones for sale that dated from the 50s and 60s. Using Google Books, I was able to find advertisements for automatic putting machines that dated back to the 1920s. You can still buy these things for $50 a pop, even the old ones. So, no definitive answer. It does not seem like these automatic putting machines were the height of sophistication or even a signifier of wealth. But in any case, I hope I asked a better question for this episode's Paul prompt. I received this delightful email from Mark Scatana, who wrote me, quote, "Outstanding work you're doing. I just started watching the show on FETV, and I'm in Season 2, Episode 15. I'm noticing that in many cases, the characters don't follow the number one rule in regards to firearms, which is treat every gun like it's loaded." That is so true, Mark, and we haven't even gotten to the case of the deadly toy yet, which is a particular bang-up episode, pun intended, from the end of Season 2. Wait till you get there. Tomas Moore wrote in with this question, quote, "I need help identifying which case it was, where the police interview a dying man just before he dies and says, 'shot by Kirby,' and Perry figures out that the dying man was really saying shot by Derby." And the answer is that's from the novel, The Case of the Screaming Woman. If that plot point doesn't seem to ring a bell and you've only seen the Season 1 episode, that's because the plot point that Tomas brought up really doesn't play a part at all in the TV adaptation. As always, I love feedback about the particular episode or the podcast in general. Was there something about this episode you'd like to comment on or something you'd like to correct? You can email me at theperrypod@gmail.com. All PerryPod episodes are available via Spotify and YouTube as well as iTunes. Thanks again for joining me on this pod journey. Join us next time as Perry investigates a case featuring bad seed Ronnie Fowler. Don't fall for it, Edith! It's the case of the bedeviled doctor. Join us, won't you? Until then, this is Jonathan Searcy saying, keep walking the Park Avenue Beach.